Welcome everyone to Rays of Light Thursday. You can't even hear it from your own screen, but despite this blinding light outside, it's actually raining right now. You would expect this kind of weather in like spring, not really in summer. But with this being said, we are now at the beginning of the third reset of the season. We have checked last time 8 days ago how things were going in the raid. We also highlighted some of the standout specs back then. If you remember, we went over Arcane Mage, Elemental Shaman and Destruction Warlock. Those were the specs of choice over a week ago. Now, it's been over a week, specs have gone up in their item level, most specs now have their 4-piece set bonus, they have gotten their first and even second craft of the season. It didn't actually change anything for those specs we mentioned. Destro, Elemental and Arcane are still amongst the top 5 performers so far in the raid, even as we have gotten more and more logs of deeper and deeper bosses, because back when we looked at this the first time, we basically had 2 or 3 mythic bosses being logged by enough guilds. Now we have at least 5. We have the first 4 and then Fractilius and a few logs right now of Soul Hunters as well. We have enough now to take a look at what things have been going down so far, with some surprises, some changes, some improvements, especially after the balance tuning that happened last week. For example, the 8% damage to Arms Warrior, the buff, the 5% buff to Ret Paladin, the nerf to Affliction Warlock, etc, etc. Now, let's start with the first bait of the day, which is Arms. If you look at this, Arms is doing well. Arms theoretically is one of the best, even melee, actually, DPS spec, even more so than one of the currently meta specs like Frostbeak, right? It looks like it's doing very well. However, when you actually go and check the results one by one, boss by boss, you can see that on Plexus, Sentinel, Arms is middle of the pack, even losing to Fury. You move over to Lumitar, which is another almost single target boss. Fury is one of the best, Arms is middle of the pack. You move over to Araz, Arms is basically towards the bottom, and then you have the Soul Hunters, with Arms being not even here, not even a single Arms was playing on Soul Hunters. So how does this make sense if Arms is this bad to be the 7th best performing spec? This comes basically from a couple of bosses, the first one being Soulbinder, where Arms is 6th. So essentially Arms right now is playing Slayer for single target, except Soulbinder is not a single target spec, so instead they play Colossus, and this is the result. The result is that they can line up their Warbreaker with their Demolish for every single ad spawn, you know, the 2 spawning, the 2 spawning, and then the back-to-back adds in the middle, and then 2 spawning, 2 spawning, and the one in the middle, and rinse and repeat. It lines up very well with Demolish, that can do the small number of 91 million damage per cast of this channel, and that's why you essentially swap over to Colossus to play this AoE fight, and what makes them do pretty decent, pretty good, you know, top damage on this fight. The other one, it's even less relevant because it's not that it's just AoE, so we can discard the results because they are AoE. It's Fractilius, which is pure single target, and you do see Arms Warrior as the best spec. What's the issue here? The issue is that there are, you know, not that many logged guilds, but more importantly, 5 Arms Warriors. So yes, the result is great, but it's with a grand total of 5 players. Just like Affliction, there is a single lone guy playing on Fractilius. So they're not nearly as relevant given how few of them there are. For example, if you compare this to Fury, right? Fury is only from 4.85 million, 4.83 million, so it's only 20k DPS behind Arms, but there are 195 Fury Warriors compared to 5 Arms Warriors. So if you were to add 190 more Arms to these logs, the chances are that this average would go down much more. However, this still gets clumped up in the average, so if you just go to Warcraft logs and check out the overall damage, you will see Arms supposedly doing great. It's not. It's just a couple of bosses. One because they are swapping to their AoE build on the ad fight, and the other one because there are very few logs right now of Arms Warriors playing on Fractilius. The one that is actually doing well, and it's not here because of a fraud cheese kind of boss fights here and there, is Marksmanship, the one that is slightly above Arms. So when you look at Soulbinder, Marksmanship is actually bottom half. And then you look at the other ad fight, which is Araz. Marksmanship is also middle of the pack, where they have their shining moment. Besides Plexus Sentinel, which is a pure single target fight, and they are second. And then you have Lumitar, which is a pseudo pure single target fight. They're not doing nearly as well, so the results are pretty up and down. Their shining moment so far has been Soul Hunters, where they have been doing quite well, and unlike specs like Affliction, which have been played by 2 players, for Marksmanship there were almost 100 of them doing very well. This is the result of the way the fight works in 3 target fights for Marksmanship. Marksmanship gains massive value from this style of damage. You can see they have already also one of the highest burst windows of damage of any other specs. You can even check them compared to their own raid. This is Marksmanship, and then you have, Destro doesn't even come close, and then you have Shadow Priest, obviously doesn't even come close. Devastation Evoker as the initial burst window, and then much lower down, Frost Decay, more or less the same thing. Marksmanship does have huge burst windows, and also they benefit a lot from playing on 3 targets. Pretty much everything in their toolkit of both Black Arrow and Aim Shot benefits from doing AoE damage. You have Phantom Pain, which splashes aim shot damage to the targets with your dot, with your Black Arrow dot. You have your Umbral Reach passive, which is going to spread your Black Arrow dot to all the targets you are hitting with Bleak Powder, and Bleak Powder is the explosion of Black Arrow. So you guarantee every time you Black Arrow to splash AoE damage on all targets. You're gonna apply the Black Arrow dot on all of the targets. Because they have the Black Arrow dot, they splash AoE damage from Phantom Pain, and because they all have the dot, they all take more damage. This is very good, obviously, when you're fighting 3 targets rather than just 1. You benefit a lot from this. Also, thanks to Umbral Reach, you can completely remove multi-shot from your rotation. You no longer need multi-shot to proc your trick shots, because Umbral Reach will do it by itself. So you save 1 global cooldown. You no longer need to press it for multi-shot every few seconds, because you will have your trick shots up by default. So it's a very good fight on a 3 target setup for Marksmanship, which is why they're doing so well. Not to say though that even as we mentioned a pure single target fight like Plexus Sentinel, Marksmanship is still doing very well. Now, admittedly, Plexus Sentinel does have a lot of downtime. It does require you to run quite a lot. Marksmanship is very mobile, they can run very well, so they get to have likely a higher uptime on the boss for more damage compared to, for example, a slower spec like Shadow Priest, for example, that might have a less uptime on the boss because of it compared to a Marksmanship Hunter. But the result in this pure single target fight is still excellent. Of course, as we mentioned, when you move to a different fight like Fractilius, despite not having nearly as many logs, Marksmanship is still doing very well. So it's not just that they were doing well on Plexus Sentinel because it's very mobile. Other slower specs don't have the same advantage. Even Fractilius, which is practically a target dummy, it practically doesn't really do anything. Marksmanship is doing very well. And unlike Arms, as we just checked, Arms Warriors and their 5 logs on Fractilius, on Marksmanship there are 238 players getting this result. So this result is legit. It's real. It's true. There are enough players logging to show that this is their average result in this fight, meaning it is very good. It's excellent, right? So very good performance so far for Marksmanship, despite the fact that before the release of this tier, if you look at the Sims, Marksmanship was doing okay, but you were still expecting them to lose to Elemental, Frost DK, Unholy DK, Destro, Demo, Arcane, Feral Druid, even Frost Mage. Instead, they have been showing so far that they are amongst the better performing specs so far overall. Up to these first 5 to 6 bosses in the raid, they have been basically one of the better performers overall. The other specs that were at the top that we mentioned already, of course, are still there, like Destro, Demo, Arcane, as well as Elemental Shaman, of course, now joined by Arms in their Fraud Results and Marksmanship Hunter. The only other, I guess, visible change is Ret. And that's because Ret was one of the other two specs mainly buffed by the balance tuning, 8% for Arms, 5% for Ret. You can even check only the latest week of results because of the buffs going live in this latest week. And Ret is quite high up next to Arms after their buffs. You can also see from the updated sims, this is post buffs. The sims here were done about yesterday really, for their updated post buff DPS, which is now top half. Not exactly top 10 or anything, but reasonable enough, just like the sims of Arms Warrior. So both of these have gone up quite a bit and they have now gotten to a reasonable level. However, there is always the question, if you keep buffing specs number 1, 2, 3, 4 because they were bad, and now they are okay. They might not be meta, top, best in slot, flavor of the month, but they are okay. If you buff them, then what happens to spec 5, 6, 7, which were already at the bottom? Now that specs 1, 2, 3, and 4 have all been buffed. Well, they will look even worse. So, this results in Balance Druid doing terribly, as well as, unsurprisingly, really, Augmentation Evoker being quite low, but also, especially, Feral Druid, Devastation Evoker, and Frost Mage. This is relevant because if we go back to the sims, Devastation Evoker was supposed to be doing pretty okay, Feral Druid was supposed to be doing way more than okay, and Frost Mage was supposed to be doing actually top 6 damage. Instead, they are all 3 at the bottom. Now, there are a few reasons for this. The usual reason for Feral is that not many play Feral to begin with. Second of all, you have some disadvantages, we can say, with Feral. You can see Feral on a pure single target fight like Plexus Sentinel doing well. Even a fight like Lumitar, Feral is still doing well, which is still mostly single target. Then you move to Soulbinder, which is many AoEs. Feral is here. You move to Araz, which is an even faster kind of AoE. Not really a lot of time for your dots to do any work because these guys need to die very fast. Feral is dreadful, practically doing tank damage. Then you move over to Soul Hunter, which is a 3 target fight. Feral is doing even worse. And lastly, again, pure single target fight. Feral is 3rd. So Feral is basically the reverse Arms. Arms is here because they are padding in a couple of AoE fights, resulting in a very spiked overall damage. Feral is the reverse because they are still doing extremely well when it comes to boss damage. Their boss damage is still acceptable. They just lose out on the fact that many of these bosses have more than just boss damage and they just fall down very low when you have to take in all the damage together. The one that is more confusing definitely is Devastation. Devastation doesn't even have the out of doing very well in AoE but bad in single target, or very well in single target or bad in AoE. This is the pure single target of Plexus Sentinel. Devastation is bottom half. Pure single target of Fractilius, Devastation is 3rd worst spec. Then you move over to the AoE of Soulbinder. Devastation is like 11th. And then again, AoE on Araz, Devastation is again bottom half. So it doesn't matter if it's AoE or if it's single target, Devastation is doing poorly overall, which is surprising given they weren't supposed to be doing that bad, actually. Yet, right now, the results are very poor. Frost Mage gets a pass. Frostman gets a pass because it's just not being played. It's just like you play Arcane. Realistically speaking, 98% of the best mage players right now are playing Arcane. Which means that the ones who are playing Frost are bad players. If you were to take all of the average good players from good guilds currently playing Arcane and you dunk them all into Frost, Frost would be here. Frost is not here because it's weak, it's not here because it's performing poorly, it's here because it's not the preferred choice of mage mains right now because they're all playing Arcane. That's really, in the end, why Frost is here, not because it's very weak. So we do have a few asterisks both at the bottom of our current results as well as towards the top of our current results. Now, as far as the results when it comes to healing, so between this last week and basically since the start of the season, we haven't really moved. We have still seen the top 3 made up of Mistweaver, Preservation and Holy Priest, and then Druid, Shaman, Paladin with the Forgotten Discipline all the way at the bottom. It has remained basically the same since the beginning of the tier. And we can see it going back the entire tier since the release of the season. It started pretty much in all of them, started pretty much in the same position. These two were the same at the top. This one was the same at the bottom. The only slight up and down after the first, like what, 1 day, after the first day of results, have been Holy Priest going up over these three specs. But for the most part, they have remained in their same positions. What is, I guess, more relevant is now Mistweaver going up much closer to Preservation Evoker, despite the fact that there has been no balance tuning whatsoever to the healers since the release of the tier. Obviously, Preservation remains with the better healing profile. They have much better burst windows. They can line up with mechanics compared to Mr. Monk, which is a more spread, consistent healing kind of fights and plan. Their smaller burst windows with their Renewing Mist and Enveloping Mist spread on all of the raid compared to Preservation Evoker, which is much more bursty in nature. But the difference isn't that large. Even if you look at the actual, good results past like 60 to 70 percentile-ish or so, the difference is not that huge. It's 5 million versus 4.7 million, which is a 300k difference on a 4.7 million result for Holy Paladin. So we're talking about a 7%, I guess, 7% HPS difference between the top and the very bottom. So it's a reasonable gap between all of these specs to stay in. Obviously, we are excluding Discipline because, even just from the play rate of this, there are very, very, very few players currently playing Discipline and likely not exactly very good at the moment. But besides them, the other healers are all doing very well and very close healing, so nothing really to be worried too much right now in terms of the healer balance when it comes to the raid. You definitely see more, I guess, gaps when it comes to the DPS, excluding Destro, when it comes to the DPS compared to when it comes to the healers. So this one is this week's beginning, this week 3 beginning of results. We will of course continue to see more changes as we get through more and more bosses. Now we have Fractilius, which will be killed more and more, which is a pure single target fight. So as we have seen, specs good in single target will be able to raise their overall value, and then more and more guilds will kill Soul Hunters, which is 3 target cleave. So specs doing better in 3 target cleave, like as we see in Marksmanship, for example, or even the multi-dotting Shadow Priest or the Havoc 2 target damage Destro will be able to raise their value. And then you will get into Nexus King, which right now obviously has like one log, a single log. Nexus King, which has very different damage profiles between the single target on the boss, the add platform phase back on the boss, which will be very different, and then lastly, of course, Dimensius, which will be even more different damage profiles. So we will see as this will develop. Obviously, we are still of the opinion that tomorrow, or at the very latest Monday, we will get balance tuning, for the specs. Not for the trinkets like we have gotten this reset, but for the actual specs. The race to World First is over. Blizzard has gathered, I'm assuming, enough data of the value and performance of the specs to launch some balanced tuning in this reset. So we'll see what will come down there. But for now though, on this Thursday, this is all we have for today. We're starting as usual our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with of course everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, are we done? Are we done raining and thundering? No, it's actually raining even harder now.